A lot of people know the golden kiwi fruit, they're green. That's golden, but it's only for a very short, like we're talking like weeks. They sell for very expensive, and the difference between like a kilo of the golden kiwi fruit compared to when it's just turned back to green is like the difference between $9.50. So now we're talking about a massive product, like a massive profit margin. So they'll just send send truckloads over there.
Ladies and gentlemen, people of the internet, welcome to Mind Gap. You're live here with Simo and Roy. He's the smart one. I press the buttons. Now we are joined with a special guest, Josh Dunford, who we had the pleasure of meeting at the Singularity Summit a few weeks ago, and he had a ton of really interesting things to tell us. He works with Postharvest. So, Josh, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's nice to see you again.
Pleasure. Yes, yes. It was. Yeah, it was a number of weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's 4, but listen, it could be more. I don't know.
Yeah.
Time flies.
We still haven't put up that video, but we might just put up that video before we get to this video anyway.
Yeah, sure.
And we are talking today about solving the global food shortage crisis. You know, like there's so many people around the world that are they're in a position where they are looking for their next meal. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And with all of the technology we have and all of the resources the human race has, it's a bit embarrassing that we're still in this situation.
Totally. A quick Google search, and I think the number is 8.9% of the total world's population, which I think is around 630 billion
million people.
Yeah, sorry, 630 million. Sorry,
people.
Got to get the millions and people, billions right. But that's staggering.
Gosh, that's a lot. That's like how many Australians would fit into there?
What are we? 27 million. So a couple.
Like wow.
I'm gonna put 25. So it's 4 times 6, 24 Australias at least in there.
That's not
600.
That's
million.
not good.
That's not good.
That's not good.
That's terrible. That's just terrible. So we have certain things that we can do to help stop this and to improve the food supply. And what are some of the ways that we can do that, Josh?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose we've illustrated the lack of the people that are currently starving, but then one of the things that a lot of people find crazy is the stat of up to 45% of all fresh produce that we've grown gets lost or wasted during the cold supply chain. So the cold supply chain is where your apples are stored, everything that gets picked.
Wow.
Up to 45% is lost or wasted. So you start sort of doing that number in your head and you're like,
wait, you mean let's say I've got 100 apples and I put it through this system, I could potentially lose
45 out of the 100.
What happens to them?
Where do we start? So I mean, apples in particular are an interesting one because we like an apple season is around 3 months a year. So you're growing your apples, but as a consumer, we expect apples on our shelves year round. So there's a 9-month gap in the year where we're not actually growing our apples. So the immediate solution is to just store our apples for a year, and then hey presto, you've got it. But apples are a living organism. Once they're picked from the tree, they continue to respirate. So you can imagine they're breathing in the carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen, and then you've got like a degradation. So what they do is they'll put them in these large cold store facilities, reduce the oxygen levels right down to around 1%, 1 to 4%, temperatures down to 2 to 4 degrees, and they pump the humidity up to around 90-95% humidity. And that's just a perfect condition.
Preservation.
I kind of joke around. It's like a cryogenic sort of state. What would happen if you chucked a human in there? Obviously, not much good.
Yeah.
But yeah. So and that's how we've been able to get our apples to sit in cold storage for up to 24 months.
Right. So basically, what it's doing is it's taking the cellular degradation process and slowing it right down.
Yeah. It's just basically like stopping the respiration.
Wow.
The natural thing that the apples do. All plant life for that matter. So then essentially you've then got a product that's able to meet consumer demand. So year round, pretty Granny Smiths, Pink Ladies sitting on the shelf at Woolies. And what will happen is in that process, obviously they want to keep the door shut because then they have to, get it down to that atmosphere again. They'll open the doors and X amount will be lost, and that just goes straight to landfill.
I see.
And
so
then
that's why
the rest. And so this is the problem just in that sort of segment, like in terms of whether it looks nice or not, whether it gets to the end consumer's fridge and they only eat, 4 of the apples that they bought. So there's a even larger issue across that. But in terms of just the cold supply chain, it's pretty crazy. And there's a couple of really cool companies that are doing some cool stuff. Like I think it's called the Ugly Fruit. They're repurposing the fruit. The fruit doesn't look so pretty. A lot of the groceries will have like a seconds bin. It's like out the front. I think Harris Farm do it maybe, where you can walk past the front. They got some, they're selling it cheaper. It doesn't look quite as nice as your nice polished apples. So there's some companies doing some cool stuff, but the problem's pretty big, and that's where we're focusing our efforts.
I would assume that other companies who are maybe vertically integrated with that sort of thing, like someone who's making baby food, would jump at the opportunity to buy those sorts of apples.
Definitely. I suppose at that stage where it's just not aesthetically pleasing, a lot of those things get used for. I think Boost Juice are doing cool stuff too, where they're just getting a lot of that sort of fruit. It doesn't matter, you chucking it in a blender, it comes out the other end, doesn't have to look shiny. But when it's spoilt produce, so if the apple is rotten, they can't do anything with that, and that's where the landfill.
Yeah.
Well, and interesting point there. You go, oh, cool. It's just it's compost. It's fertilizer.
Yeah.
But landfill. So it's 1/3 of all landfill is fresh produce, and landfill is the largest emitter of methane, which I think I think it's 20 times more potent than carbon. So like carbon's an issue, right?
Yeah.
Methane, so like you're now talking about like not just like a wastage problem in terms of feeding the globe.
Combustion problem.
Yeah, it's pretty pretty.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's more potent than carbon in the atmosphere.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So like climate change enthusiasts, it's sort of like a bit of a buzzword when you talk about how much carbon and methane we're emitting into the atmosphere just from our wasted produce. And the core to all that whole entire problem. Sorry, that's a bit of a pun. Apple core is consumer demand. We want the apples all year round, so they need to store so much more than is required, just because they're trying to overcome the loss.
Yeah.
Transportation is a massive thing. Like, how do you get a bunch of fresh produce in a steel container across the ocean? Kiwi fruits getting sent to to Asia, to all around the world from New Zealand. Berries out of South America. It's like the infrastructure of getting a living organism that's just been picked from its natural environment in a boat for 2 months across the. It's just like it's a large infrastructure problem. So that's why they have an oversupply, and then they just absorb the losses.
Wow. Okay.
Whoa.
So we're basically we need to create almost 1.5 times more fruit in this apple example as we actually need, because we want it all year round and we need to put it through cold storage.
Yeah.
And
sorry. Essentially, with our current practices.
With the current practices. So isn't there any better way to do this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's essentially why we exist. So we're a startup company. We've been around in Australia for 2 years. We've done a lot of R&D in this space, and what we've developed is a product. It's essentially a sensing product. There's an array of organic compounds which you could imagine you'd find in a cool store environment. One in particular, our sort of favorite little one is ethylene. So it's C2H4. It is essentially a naturally occurring organic compound. Most life emits it, but in terms of fresh produce, it's a really good indicator to the maturation cycle of fresh produce. So you can imagine apple. So bananas are the best example. They're little, they're green, then one day they're yellow, and then you can eat it. If you were to map that on an ethylene emission sort of chart, you'd see this nice curve that goes all the way up, and there's a point where it's like perfect, and then it kind of drops out. And that emission of ethylene is what scientists and these cool store, or growers in general have been using to track when things are ripe. The really hard part isn't exactly when it's ripe, because it's emitting a lot. It's that couple of months out where it's emitting like really, really tiny amounts, like right down in the parts per billion range.
Whoa.
So we've developed a sensor which is able to, in real time, track that emission months out from ripeness. And that's where there currently doesn't exist a really sophisticated solution. And we're basically on the verge of cracking that. So we're in our final stage trials, research trials, and then in the next couple of months we'll be going to clients with a prototype device that's they're able to sort of trial within their ecosystem, and then hopefully.
Wow.
So let's say I'm a client and I want to use this tech. So let's say with your bananas example. So I have my warehouse with bananas in it. How would I actually use that? Will I just take a small sample and test it, or how would I go about doing it?
Yeah, so rewinding a tiny bit, how they're currently doing it. Bananas have a 5-part test. They don't use a device at the moment, so it's probably easy to say what they're currently doing and then how we would attempt to solve it. So they're currently they're grabbing a banana, they're doing like a skin tension test, like seeing how firm it is. They're snapping it in half, they're smelling it, ripping some of the peel off. So they're doing very physical, labor intensive tests.
Basic stuff.
Really basic stuff.
Right.
What's another great example? So they've got these special kind of like little probe devices that presses against the skin, and once again tests to see, based on a certain level of skin tension is what ripeness level it is. The problem is we call these destructive tests. So essentially the produce you're testing on gets destroyed.
Yes.
The really interesting thing about ethylene, it's a sneaky little bugger. What it does is it amplifies in damaged fruit. So you can imagine a really good example is if you have an unripe banana and you put it next to a very ripe banana overnight, the one that isn't ripe will become ripe.
Wait. So you're saying that this ethylene can affect the fruit next to it?
Yeah. So it has a compounding effect, and that's where if you've got like a rotten batch of produce. So it's a rotten, I say it's over ripened, so it's past the point of being edible. That will have a compounding effect on all the batches around it. So a really great example is if you've got an unripe banana, you put another piece of ripened fruit next to it, and it's going to cause it to ripe. So it's the classic like chuck an apple and an unripe banana in a bag together. Have a nice little overnight party. The apple's going to emit ethylene, and then the banana will ripen.
Wow, I had no idea that was.
Well, okay. Here's another fun one for you. Bananas are picked green, so every banana you eat has been picked green. They put them in these rooms and they release a big gas bottle full of ethylene into the room, maybe a couple of weeks out from being on your shelves at your supermarkets, and then all those bananas will go from green to yellow, and then you pick it and you.
How long will it take to go from green to yellow? Just out of interest.
Like 24 to 48 hours. Depending on how much it's exposed to. So so a lot of people don't know that.
It's dramatic.
So that's a natural occurrence. That ethylene is produced by, say, bananas, but they're just using that gas.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the industry. So the thing that there's a lot of people in the market at the moment, a lot of sensing products, extremely expensive, very sophisticated tech that you would need a specialist, if not a scientist, to operate. Like talking like so it's called the main ones are called GC machines, so gas chromatography. They will have like a local lab. So New Zealand's a perfect example. There's a lot of kiwi fruit obviously coming out of New Zealand. What they do is they'll go into the room and they'll take an air sample with like a syringe, put a cap on, pop it in an envelope, send it to the local lab. Then they'll get a test result back in 2 days to 2 weeks. And then that'll say the ethylene concentration in that room is X amount. The problem with that is
2 days.
From our research, like excess levels of ethylene in a room has causes product failure or product damage within 2 hours. And then within 8, it's kind of like
They're 46 hours too late.
Yeah.
Well, and yes, if you're relying on your local post,
Hmm.
I don't know how your postal deliveries are going at the moment, but mine's
Oh.
taken.
Oh, yeah. Not good.
It's useless then.
Yeah,
It's
and
useless.
then that has a whole other sort of array of problems. The syringes they use are usually made out of polyethylene. Ethylene, so C2H4 has a half-life in a polyethylene tube of 8 hours. So by the time it gets to the
If it was there, you wouldn't detect it.
well, the
so-
levels would be like it literally just pass through it because it's a a similar compound.
Mm.
So C2H4 has a half-life.
As in like its ability to dissipate from that environment.
Oh, does it like okay.
So it essentially just saying like if you put water in a water cage, eventually the water's going to
Evaporate. or
That
something.
might not be the best example, but essentially like
It disperses somehow.
yeah, it's going to
Okay.
disperse. And so that's where the product that we're developing, it takes a lot of the ideas behind how it's sensed and the accuracy levels, but it becomes a real-time device. So we actually put our units inside the room.
Yeah.
And then we're constantly sensing. So we're basically constantly getting readings from-
Real-time data.
So you
Yeah.
would be able to say isolate specific bananas or pieces of fruit that you are monitoring
Mm.
and get their actual output then and there in real time.
Exactly. And if there's a problem, we can deal with it straight away. So what the problem is obviously determines what the solution is, but in most cases, so kiwi fruits are a great example because they're highly susceptible to ethylene. So they're not good friends. If there's too much ethylene, they're going to go rotten really quick.
Wow.
So basically, like if there's a spike in ethylene levels, you need to deal with it really quick. And
Gotcha.
a couple of things could be, is there a fluctuation in the temperature of the room? Excess, like a lot of heat, obviously incubates the situation. Is the door left open? There's a whole industry around ethylene scrubbing. So similar to how like a dehumidifier works.
You pull it out.
Yeah, you can actually pull it out. But once again, without a real-time
Monitor.
how do you know when to turn it on and off? How long should you leave it on for? Because keeping in mind, like you need ethylene
You need
to
it
some degree.
to ripen the So this is interesting. So you've got this market. How much? So then the next question to ask would be how much of the fruit would you potentially save if you're chucking 45 out of say 100 apples using the old method?
Mm. Yeah, well, it's really interesting because there's other considerations too. Like some apples can get diseases. So like there's a disease called botrytis, which does affect produce.
Yeah.
There's different ones, once again we're there if we're able to using these ethylene, the ethylene result, like the data we're collecting, we're able to start predicting some of these things happening. So you're saying like, hey, it's probably gonna on the curve that it's currently at. It's going to need to go to market in 3 months. If you leave it in there for 4 months, it's probably going to be spoiled. So now we can start sort of instructing or forecasting loadout times. So there's a whole bunch of really interesting stuff we can do with the data. It's not just, hey, when is it ripe? It's, let's beat it. So another really fun example is the golden kiwi fruit. So a lot of people know the golden kiwi fruit. So like typically they're green.
Mm.
There's a certain varietal that's golden, but it's only for very short, like we're talking like weeks, if maximum a month. So now if you're it's really popular in the Asian market. I think in Hong Kong they sell for very expensive, and the difference between like a kilo of the golden kiwi fruit compared to when it's just turned back to green or not in its perfect state is like the difference between $9 and 50 cents. So now we're talking about a massive product, like a massive profit margin. So they'll just send they'll send truckloads over there, and then once again it's like the profit margin that the grower or the retailer can make back, but then also the wastage that's involved in getting enough produce there to satisfy the need. So it's a very complex problem that we're sort of trying to tackle.
Okay. Well, I mean that's a huge profit margin there, 20x for the golden stage of the kiwi fruit.
Yeah.
Well, what about getting back to the apples? So how much? What would you expect to be able to reasonably preserve instead of 45% loss, what's your estimate to lowering that?
Yeah, so it's sort of a twofold thing. So one of the ideas is firstly, what can we save? So like we've done trials in the past that have given us good indications that we can reduce the wastage down to 5%.
Wow.
But then it becomes like a supply and demand issue. Like, do we need to store that many apples? Because if we know we're going to, but on top of that, they talk about by 2050, we're going to have to double our food supply to meet the needs of a growing population.
Yes.
And, you know, we've got all these people saying like, what's going to happen to the world? It's going to blow up. And they don't say that, but you know what I mean? Like there's a massive, this is like a critical sort of mass point in time. Straight away, you're like, well, if we've got to double our food supply and we're wasting 45% of it, let's just fix that. Instead of trying to like grow more and then that goes into a whole like, you talk about like issues with agronomy and stuff like the soil, the way that we're depleting soil nutrition and not like leaving, you know, farms and pastures, giving it time to regenerate, all that kind of stuff. Like if we're able to start reducing our waste levels, then we can start fixing a lot of those problems as well. Water's a massive thing. If you talk to some people about water, you talk about how there's like that's kind of the future of like what we're gonna have a scarcity of. The amount of water that goes into farming is astronomical. Like there's the amount of water that's required. I think I watched a Netflix doco, the one about I think green gold, where the cartels in South America are now starting to traffic avocados instead of the drugs because there's so much money in avocados.
Really?
Who would have thought of that?
You got to watch this doco because they talk about this local town who have like their little well, and the cartel have moved in, and they've boarded it up, and they've got guys walking around this little lake with automatic machine guns, stopping the locals accessing their own water because they need the water to hydrate the avocado crops.
Wow.
So now we've got people like dying of thirst because of avocados. So like water's going to become a massive thing because, and once again, like the being able to save the water by not having to produce as much. So yeah, it's sort of, that's why I say twofold, because it's not just how much can we save, it's also how much we need to then grow if we're saving X amounts. A lot of the times as well, sorry, I'm rambling, but the growers will absorb the losses in terms of the profits because they only get money for what they sell and market. So if they give 100 apples and 45 of them get thrown out, then they just make the money on the 55. So straight away there's like a massive loss for them for all their hard work. A lot of my family sort of history has come from farming, Parks, sort of Tamworth, out that sort of way. And I've got my dad's first cousin has a farm out in Parks, and they were suffering so much through the drought. And you think like all the hard work they go, it's backbreaking work, and then to see it like just be like thrown out as loss, it's sort of it's pretty rough.
I mean, Australia's very unique in that sense where it's just the whole continent is just
susceptible to nature.
It's like all the rivers just lead to the coast, as in it just drains itself every time there's a huge downpour in Australia. It just drains all the water out of it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's good for other things like nuclear waste, but anyway, we're going to talk about that later. But but for food and for farming, it's an uphill battle.
Definitely, and like I feel like my dad will call them townies. We'll call us townies. You get so my parents own property down sort of Southern Highlands, and we still don't have like normal water. We live on tank water. Okay. So like it rains and you're like, hey, we're gonna have a long shower, and we had this little like 1 minute timer, and after 1 minute of in the shower, Dad would be banging on the wall like, what are you doing in there?
Oh wow!
Trying to get out because you're worried about water conservation, and then you're in town. If it rains one day, everyone's like having hose parties and like I don't know what a hose party is, but you know what I mean, like that kind of thing where we still might have like a really
they're embracing it.
And we've been really fortunate in the last year to have a lot of rain. But like you go back a couple of years, and is the rain going where it needs to go? Like still got farmers suffering. So yeah, it's a very complex issue. And I feel like that's where what we're trying to do is just at the moment focus on the cold storage chain, the cold store chain,
Yeah.
supply chain, and just really focus on minimizing the losses.
That's very important. If you could put a machine into these cold storage areas with just a certain simple methodology to work out what's going off, how to manage these repositories, and you're not changing anything else. You're not changing trucking routes. You're not changing farming practices. You're just changing the way that they're stored, and to go from potentially 45% loss down to only 5%, whatever it is, that's huge.
That's massive.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
And
so does all the fruit create the same gas? Because you were saying bananas create one and
C2H4.
apples.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Like,
interesting.
is it a different? Would you have to measure different things like apples, bananas, kiwi fruits? Do they all produce the same thing that you're measuring? Or
No, that's a good point. So there's different types of. So there's climacteric fruit and there's non-climacteric. So some produce continues to ripen once it's been picked. Some produce doesn't. Like at that state, that's what it's going to stay at. So things like apples and bananas, they will continue to ripen. And that's why we're able to pick bananas
Early.
green and wait till they go yellow.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different sort of different horses for different courses, but essentially the main sort of thing is the atmospheric condition that they're stored in has to be optimal as to the produce. So there still needs to be that high degree of real-time accuracy in terms of like the data we can pull from the room, and that's where we're really confident in putting that level of technology into a core room, and we've got ambitions to be able to through the use of APIs plug into air conditioning, like atmospheric
Control it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Actually control it.
Well, that's the thing. So it's now an atmospheric controller. It's not just like a sensing device. We're able to, and so we've got our software development team who have built like a really sophisticated IoT platform that's able to do some fancy stuff. To the data that's coming out and display it in certain ways. But then, once again, the end goal is being able to plug into temperature controls, humidity controls, other like I was saying, the ethylene scrubbers before, and say, hey, don't just turn it on and turn it off because that's what the label says to do, but just have this machine do it for you. Yeah. And then you can kind of imagine after...
And they could feather it and adjust it at real time. Yeah.
Exactly, and you can imagine the data that you get from a couple of seasons of having this sort of device in there. You're starting to educate yourself on hey, this is the best possible environment for long-term storage of fresh produce.
And then you could train an AI to
totally,
manage it.
Yeah,
wow,
totally. And then you've got also the ability to start sort of saying plugging into your 3PL, third-party logistics providers, hey, this is when your shipment needs to be
order it.
up.
It's
just so much stuff that you can do from the data.
Thing. You could run the whole thing based on the data coming out of these devices, from ordering to storing to managing to going, okay, this will be ripe at this time. Can you, so when the machine's inside, how could you, I'm imagining, say, if you have, say, apples, you could compartmentalize the apples and you monitor each, say, batch or box. So if there's an overripe situation in one of them, it may only, you're at least mitigating it to just that batch.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, we've got what we call an atmospheric sensor because it's for a room. Future applications would be on a batch level. So you've got a crate. And keep in mind, a cold storage facility has smaller rooms in it and they actually do segment.
Right.
And that's where at the moment you'd be doing a room control level. But then, the future of being able to be on a pallet level and sort of say, hey, pallet, whatever it is, C24 needs to be removed because it's over ripening. Massive problem with potatoes as well. They're also susceptible to this, to ethylene. So, knowing the best, at the moment, we did some trials a little while ago with the company, and their fix was turning fans on to keep the moisture out of the air, so that
okay.
So basically they'll walk into a room, they'll see if it smells like sulfur because that's a bad sign for potatoes. They'll look under the trays. If they can see some liquid coming down, then that's a bad sign. And then if they can see some sludge on the floor, that's another bad sign. And they're like, cool, let's turn the fans on.
And so the fans,
just dry it out. So
they come from the outside air comes out.
So
Right.
moisture is a big problem. And I think I mentioned before about the courses that we've been developing more for the end consumers or for the end consumers as well as operators. But there's heaps of little tips and tricks you can learn. So like a capsicum, if you cut it and you want to, or pepper, depending on who's listening, if you want to keep it, then you put a paper towel on it because that's going to start absorbing the moisture. Put it in a brown paper bag, store it in a cool place, and that's gonna last up to 2 days longer than it would be able to if you just sort of chucked it in the fridge because the moisture is what starts to
Dry it out.
dry it out. Avocados, drop some lemon juice on it. Stops it from browning because the acid stops the oxidization of the fruit. That's the same thing with apples. Potatoes, if you want to peel your potatoes and keep them for a couple of days, put them in a thing of water, put a bit of vinegar in it. The vinegar is once again going to stop oxidization, so your potatoes don't turn brown.
My
There's all
potatoes
these-
turn brown as soon as I peel them.
So you peel them into what? Peel them straight into a big tub of water.
Oh, right. Okay.
Straight away, that's going to fix most of the problem. Put a little bit of vinegar or some lemon juice in that water, and then you've got them good overnight. So you can peel your potatoes a day before. There's so many little fun little things like that people just don't know about.
If people know about this, imagine how much food you'd save.
Oh, totally.
Even actionable things like this.
Actionable.
I heard about something. If you had a green banana and you put it in an apple with a brown paper bag in the fridge overnight, it might not be 100%, but it's going to be.
Well, you wouldn't put it in the fridge. You'd just leave it out because the
It
colder
dries it out.
temperature is, or it's the heat. So like you can imagine, if you put it in the fridge, like reducing temperature helps longevity for produce. So if you if you just leave it out on your bench in a paper bag with apple or a banana that's already completely ripe, it's going to have a compounding effect like we we're talking about before. So there's so many of those little tips and tricks, and I'm sorry to do a shameless plug, but we've got courses literally in there.
Let's take a look. Let's take a look. Have you got Postharvest website?
I have.
If you go to the top right, I think it's literally says courses.
Okay. Courses, yeah.
Yeah, like it just on the courses.
Fresh produce.
Yeah, fresh produce is probably a few different options there.
Produce, consumer, nutritional facts.
Yeah, look, if you just click on it, there's a page with just I can't remember how many courses. There's a fair few on there. Just fresh produce courses. You scroll down, we'll sort of categorize them into different things. So you can see a couple there.
Wow.
So that's nutritional facts. But if you go back, if you just click courses but don't actually select anything,
Just click it there.
Oh.
Yeah.
it should just go to the main page or all courses. Yeah, all courses. Yeah, so I mean, this is just like a little thing we've just put together, and once again, it's like a little sort of side hobby, passion project for us because you've got this information that you've learned from doing all the research. How do you get it into the hands of people that can use it?
So anyone could just go on and sign up for a course, and
you click it. It's essentially like we've recreated Teachable, but better because it's free. And yeah, so like you want to so there's a couple there that are specific. Your growers, suppliers, but you can sort of filter them like just to consumer ones, like what is the cold chain, and there's a whole bunch of ones in there. You click on it, some of them have little videos, some of them just have like pop quizzes and stuff, but we're going to keep adding to this. We're actually about to launch a YouTube channel which has a bunch of fun tips on it as well. I'm going to do some random cooking stuff on it.
Have you switched it?
Excellent. Yeah, we can overlay.
Has that ever been on the right hand side?
Yeah.
Oh, it was good. All right, I'll cut my bit out.
That's right. See, like if I could click on consumer tips,
Here we go.
that's a fun little one. Which basically, so it's just sort of pushed you through. But if you course overview there, it's going to give you a bit of a top and tail what it's about. And in there, there's a video lesson. There's a cut, and it's not going to be for everyone. But I feel like if you just jump in and have a little fiddle around, you're going to learn a couple of fun things on how to make your produce last a bit longer. And I think for us, that's if that's all people got out of it, like some fun little tricks like your peel potatoes, put them straight into water. They're not going to turn brown.
Yeah.
Squeeze some lemon juice on your fresh cut, whatever it is, and it's going to once again stop it from turning brown.
Wow.
That and you know what's funny? I don't know if it's kind of chicken before the egg. situation, but guacamole, you put lime in it. The lime, because of the citric acid, stops the avocado from turning brown. Because if you just mash up some avocado and chuck it in a bowl, it's going to turn brown.
Like very quickly.
Yeah, but if you put lime juice in there, it's going to stay nice and green for a long time. So then, is the lime juice in there because it stops the avocado turning brown, or is it because South Americans love the taste of lime? It's probably both, to be honest.
Probably both.
Yeah, that's the whole reason why we have soy sauce and people salt them, smoke the meat. It's just it was ways of preserving
preservation.
And it just makes so much sense. I love salad dressing, but really it was there to like kill the bugs. But
well, yeah, totally. Like most salad dressings have some form of vinegar in it.
Yeah.
Vinaigrettes, right?
Yeah, and salt.
So they'll put like red wine vinegar or balsamic vinegar.
Yeah,
salt, exactly. And we're lucky now we've got fridges. But if you go back, long enough, there's no fridge. So what do? They cure meat with salt. Yeah. My wife is her mother is from a remote village in the Himalayas, like right near Nepal.
Wow.
And I was fortunate enough to get over there a couple of times before COVID, and you see the abattoirs there, and it's just like a guy in like a side little kind of little hut thing, and he's just got like the whatever they've slaughtered, and it's just hanging there, and they just cut it up and they'll eat the food straight away, because they don't have the same sort of infrastructure here where you'd never see that. Yeah. You'd never be walking down the side of the road wherever you are and just see a guy like slaughtering an animal, and people just walking up. Oh yeah, I want the leg. Oh cool, there's the leg. And
because it's so cold there, it must kind of be like a giant freezer anyway.
Well, yeah, but even then, like in Australia and sort of the Western world, we 24-day dry aged steaks and all that kind of stuff. Over there, it's like if you want an animal for dinner, you'll kill it and you'll eat it that night. That's how it is. Wow. That's how it is. But yeah, sorry, that was once again another tangent. But yeah.
Well, I like it how before, in the olden days, people used to deliver ice.
Yeah, the ice boxes and stuff.
To you, whatever. And yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around how they would actually use it. But it must have worked. It must have worked. And then the whole refrigeration thing came about with the, what's the name of that process where they squish the gas and
compressed.
Whatever that process is.
Oh, like for the refrigerators. Yeah, my one of my best mates is an air conditioner installer.
He's an air conditioner HVAC specialist.
He should know.
What is this process? Well, all I think of is boilers,
I'm trying to wrap my head around what you're on about.
You compress, PV equals nRT. You compress the air. It goes up in temperature. The lower the pressure, the cooler the temperature. Yes,
but in order to get cooling, you need heating, and you need some sort of metering device, whether it's a TX valve or a capillary tube.
All right, look, let's just forget that. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, so with refrigeration, we were able to advance the civilization to where we have it now.
True.
We're able to, it's like you see something like that and you go, that is a good application of that technology. It's not really wasted. It's used properly. Although, when you go into supermarkets and I see these open refrigerators, I just
the energy loss is pretty.
Trying to fix those.
To entice the customers.
They work on the system of there's an air curtain, and it blows this air curtain, and it's ambient temperature here and cool temperature here. But if you get your hand and do this, there's no air curtain, and I don't know why they still use them, because they're a nightmare.
I think the losses must be huge.
But 100%. 100%.
Whatever gets the customer, capitalism.
Well, and that go back to the root of one of the roots of the problem, consumer demands. Like we want what we want all around. And like you could probably go back. I mean, if let's go back to we're all farmers and we're living off the land, we would just eat seasonally, because you wouldn't.
Yeah.
And in some degree, you're like, we only have mangoes certain times of the year. But just for whatever reason, there's a couple of fruits, like bananas, a great example, apples. We just want them all year round.
What about with vertical farming and farming where they control the light? Couldn't I think one of the good selling points of that was that they could have seasonal vegetables or seasonal produce all year round, and they have it's sped up, as in what might take 3 months can be achieved in like a month.
Yeah, so they with the lighting, so it's like this purple light, and I think a great example of that is they use it in like lettuces. Like you can get these home little pod situations where you have nice soil, you put your seeds in, or you put like a lettuce crop and then the purple light, and every day you basically can grow enough lettuce to eat. It's just rapidly growing lettuce.
I didn't know it was that fast.
And well, the crazy thing is the vertical farming is awesome because you can imagine the water efficiency, because if you've got like a big
100 times more or something.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then once again, like you controlling the environment, and you talk about the future of the planet, and even Australia was saying before how it's an uphill battle in terms of our
water,
land and everything.
Yeah.
If you're able to just create an environment that's sort of artificial, perfect for the produce to grow in, then you've solved the problem. And and also, I remember also they didn't have to use pesticides anywhere near as much when it's a controlled environment, because the pests just don't come in. Yeah, totally. You control it.
Controlled, yeah. I guess controlled
so less
space.
Pesticides, less water. The energy from the lighting is a lot less than. Well, I think it's expensive, but it's way cheaper than. I mean, the benefits outweigh the.
We've got a blog. We've got a blog about vertical farming. I wouldn't be able to tell you how to find it, but I know it is on the website.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we'll do some.
We will find it.
We might post it afterwards.
We have a content writer who works for us. He's sort of our head of content. He loves. His name's Mitch. He loves like obscure sort of fun facts, and we've got a whole bunch of YouTube videos about to put out, and a lot of them are just like AI in agriculture, like technology, how it's influencing. It's just kind of like a fun thing for us at Postharvest, like just a bunch of geek nerds who like who love that kind of stuff and are trying to also influence in our own way in terms of our actual product.
Gotcha.
Well, that's good. That's good.
All right.
If you're always staying true to, hey, this is who we are and this is what we want to try and do, and we're just going to be ourselves and not just going to go, hey, there's money to be made here.
Yeah.
Like, that's where you succeed, I reckon.
Yeah, and I think that was a lot of the push behind the courses as well. Like, because a lot of people sort of say, how do I get involved in it? And we got asked that question so many times. We're like, let's just check some courses online. We don't sell to consumers in terms of our actual product. Like, not many people personally own cold storage facility, but if they can learn, and maybe one day we might have a product that works in your fridge. But for now, at least, if you can jump on and learn how to store your apples better in your own fridge, then that's going to help the problem.
Could potentially Postharvest be integrated into a fridge?
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting segue. I feel like I almost set it up myself, but we've done some trials in terms of what it could potentially look like. Our actual technology is really honed in for that early stage, super like accurate, small levels of ethylene, where when you're in your consumer fridge, it's already ripened.
It's already there for you, right? Gotcha. This is for the
the cool storage facilities.
Yeah.
But having said that, if I said to you, hey Roy, you've just bought 10 apples, if you don't eat them by next Tuesday, you're going to be throwing them in the bin. That information might be beneficial for you. So that's why we've done some trials around what obviously a smaller footprint device could look like that would incorporate into a fridge. And those trials are really successful. So I think it's probably like a stage 2 for us. So maybe 2022 would
you look at that.
We'd look at that.
You would have a fridge, the smart fridge would send you a message or notification, remember to eat these apples by this date. And
we've got the infrastructure in terms of our IoT platform. That could be an app, it could be plugged straight in, like you're saying, to the smart fridges. It's just a matter of getting the device right. And so that's really interesting to us, because then eventually we'd be able to like give a product that could really we call it farm to fork. So basically cover that whole supply chain, not just in the cold storage.
Farm to fork.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which is sort of one of our big goals, creating food transparency throughout the whole supply chain. Because that's a big thing. Like people want to know like where their food came from. Is it the best quality possible? So being able to have this sort of environment where you're able to go, oh, this apple that I have in my fridge came from this place, and this is the chain it went through.
I see.
I had a really interesting chat with the guys at planet.com who have satellites obviously around the world. And at the moment I think they're at I can't remember, sorry, it's either 1 or 10 meter resolution scale.
Yep.
But once they get down small enough, you'll essentially through, blockchain technology be able to
See the apple.
and track it. So you'll be able to go like, oh, that apple that I ate, this was a photo of it 6 months ago on the field in
Oh my gosh.
wherever. So that was a really interesting chat because I was like, oh man, this is just like blowing my mind because at the moment we just want to like reduce waste levels, but people want that transparency. Like transparency, providence, like it's all big sort of questions that people are starting to ask, like, hey, where did this come from? And it happened a lot in a lot of other industries in terms of like fashion. Like people want to know, is it sustainably sourced? Is there child labor involved? And you've got these companies who are like getting materials that are who are avoided, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you think it'll be the new revolution of if it's free range, like when that sort of seemed to come
the
to
free
pass,
range chicken, free range.
that was the latest.
That's because there's no transparency.
Yeah, I know, but do you see like measuring from go to woe the journey of how the fruit is kept would be as big a thing as the whole free range meat and stuff? Like, I know it's a bit of a stretch, but
yeah, I don't know. I feel like people want to know where it came from, and to an extent, like you look at a Pink Lady's apple, like in my head, I know what the label looks like. Same with Granny Smith. I know exactly what a Granny Smith apple looks like.
Yep.
And you have a certain level of trust in the brand that they've done, what they need to do to give you the best quality apple. And I think it's gonna be a rising concern. Like I've been to a couple of conferences over the last few years, and a lot of people are asking those questions like, provenance, where did it come from? How was it grown? How was it supplied? And I think it's just it's natural of every industry to sort of go through that sort of process of becoming more transparent.
What about now? This is also to do with transparency, but the thing, I mean, looking to the near to long term future, we're looking at potentially moving a lot of the meats to meat substitute. Not even as a, if you have anything against, killing animals or whatever.
Sure.
Even besides that point, even if that wasn't any point of conjecture, it's just out of necessity. We would have to move to plant-based meats substitutes. And that would put more strain, I guess, on the infrastructure of agriculture. However, it will be greatly offset by farming and livestock. But then you've got that whole, where did this come from? Where did this piece of artificial meat, where did that come from? And maybe people will draw distinction. They're like, okay, I'm used to vegetables coming from a farm or whatever, but this is supposed to be meat. Maybe people won't even care, but maybe some people will. So that could be useful in getting people to adopt meat or artificial meat. Yeah,
I think it's definitely interesting.
Yeah,
it's definitely an interesting one because I mean, you've got like we're like in terms of Australia, like we have a massive infrastructure of farming. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I feel like most people are going to be like, oh, I feel pretty safe, it's coming from Australia. But I think
if it's coming from Australia,
from Australia. But I think as soon as you start going like, oh, this is heavily manipulated, I feel like it's just natural. People are going to start wanting to ask those questions like, oh, okay, where did it come from? The labels on the back are probably going to start becoming a bit more involved in terms of not just the ingredients, but like.
In fact, I think that might even be the defining point because you saw with 2020 when there was a pandemic, if there's not enough information available, people aren't going to be adventurous.
Yeah,
like
right.
if there's
Yeah.
new types of meat, artificial meat, and it says made in some other country, you're gonna ask questions.
Yes.
You know, because you haven't tried it before. You may have bought other things from other countries, but it's been there since you were a kid. You're used to it. You know.
Mm.
But if it's something new, like a new type of artificial meat,
Yeah.
that's the first thing that comes up in my mind is like, what's in this?
Yeah.
Where did it come from? And this level of transparency, if there is a level of transparency, is you'll be able to look at it and go, oh, okay, oh, that's what it looks like. That's where it went to. I am comfortable trying this.
Mm.
I've tried a lot of meat substitutes. The latest one was the Rebel, the Hungry Jack's Rebel.
Oh yeah.
You know, even though
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not, you know, I mean, I found it fine.
Yeah.
They ladled so much sauce on it, I couldn't really tell, but I don't care. I mean, I like the sauce.
I think sometimes you can't even taste what's in those burgers
Yeah.
because of the amount of sauce on top of it.
I
Yeah.
did notice something though,
Mm.
that when it got cold, there was a huge difference.
Oh really?
But that just means that, you know, they're constantly, maybe not constantly, but they're refining this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
yeah,
going to be more and more as the competition heats up to get the meat substitutes, and because there's big bucks involved, there's going to be so much demand for it, and maybe people won't even care. Like I've got no sugar in my drink,
Yeah.
and I love it, and I can't wait for there to be no sugar pancakes
Mm.
and no sugar caramel sundaes. I would just eat that all the time.
Yeah. That'd be
You
good.
know? It might be a
And you,
sodium
you
problem,
wouldn't feel bad about it.
but yeah, I wouldn't feel bad at all.
No.
Just because I
being
know,
healthy.
I know with the sugar substitute that you can't caramelize it and do what the
Yeah,
normal
right.
things. Yeah, but they're working on a syrup version, but you have to add it differently. You can't.
It's not quite the same.
Yeah, you can't.
Oh,
You can't.
right.
You can't heat it because it breaks down or whatever. But you have to. It hydrolyzes. I
Mm.
don't know what that means, but you put stuff in it, but you have to put it in a different order. But then it's supposedly if they pull it off, it'll taste just like the real thing, but no sugar.
No sugar.
Oh, that'd be good.
So you know, there'll be so much demand for that stuff, and there'll
Yeah.
be so much demand for artificial meats. I did artificial meats.
Well,
If it makes my heart healthier and my body healthier, and then you've got the people who are like, you know, they want their meat, they might have a
Yeah.
veneer of real meat or biopsied artificially grown meat.
Have you? I was gonna say, like, have you seen how they actually like growing steaks in a lab? So like they're like basically like knitting together like a steak, which is like
Right.
not animal flesh, but it's animal flesh.
It's cultured animal flesh, correct?
Yeah. So it's organic, but it's.
I heard that it doesn't taste the same because they haven't gotten the texture of the fat and the thing in between.
I haven't
yeah.
I haven't tasted it yet myself, but I was
Yeah.
chatting to a person who's a vegan because of animal cruelty,
All right. Yep.
and she wasn't gonna eat it. But then I was like, well,
The animal's still alive.
yeah. So I think she ended up eating it, and yeah, it's just wild because you're like, it's such a funny conundrum because you're like, well, if you know,
Yeah.
chicken before the egg kind of situation again, but it's
Yeah.
it's super interesting, and I feel like once again, people like the transparency thing we're talking about. People want to know where did it come from. It's particularly if it's in a lab because you know they're still using.
Yeah. There'll be so much apprehension.
Mm.
Me too. I mean, I would think so. I would think twice before, you know, trying anything like that. But, you know, it is the future, for sure.
So I feel like I'm a pretty adventurous person. Like I feel like
All right.
I'm on board. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think like back to the point though, like it's being more what's the word, like in terms of like the fresh produce industry in general, like increasing transparency. I feel like it's that whole thing of if there's nothing wrong happening, then you don't mind the transparency coming. It's kind of like, I mean, it's probably taboo to talk about.
Yes,
It's sort of like
that's correct.
the Crown Casino thing. They're like
Okay.
they got their license banned, but it's like, but like why? Like if there's nothing dodgy going on, so are you happy to clean it all up? But then I don't know. Sorry, that's a bit of a random tangent, but like,
Oh,
if
no, it makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah,
And the same with the drinks. I was thinking, wouldn't it be an incredible experiment, even though it probably won't happen, if, say, being comfortable with something, say they substituted, just like they might have substituted sugar. There was a period where I was transitioning from normal Coke to Coke Zero.
Yeah.
Because somehow they got the formula spot on.
Yeah.
And it didn't taste like Diet Coke or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would be at the stage where, I might go through McDonald's and I would order a Coke Zero. And they would not press the diet button on the plastic thing.
Yeah.
And I would taste it, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell. So I would have to ask them, is this Coke Zero?
Yeah, sure.
And they would say yes. And I would go, wow. Because for sure it was normal Coke. If you get to that level, like imagine being tasting meat, going to a fast food chain like McDonald's or whatever, and they substituted the meat in their cheeseburger in select chains for a whole year.
And you didn't know.
And then they told you, oh, by the way, we're changing the meat in our cheeseburger to this. And people go, oh no, I don't think I like it. Well, you've been having it for a whole year already. Yeah, well, that would blow people's minds. I think that would be amazing. But anyway,
I feel like you'd probably get a fair few people being like, you gave me what?
Exactly.
But once that died down, I feel like you definitely I mean, it's interesting because I mean I love steak. I love meat.
I love steak.
I love cooking with meat. Like I'm going camping this weekend out near Bathurst, and we're gonna have an open fire. We're gonna be cooking, all the
nice.
tasty things you can imagine. But having said that, when you wrap up some sweet potatoes and some potatoes and pumpkin or whatever and chuck it in the coals, they taste amazing as well.
Nice and crispy. Yeah, love that.
Yes,
love that.
Well, see now as soon as I thought of the steak, my mind just blanked.
Yeah, sorry. It's 2:20.
It's 2:20. It's time to eat.
Food happens. Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Josh, for this enlightening. Can you just bring up the website again? It's postharvest.com. There's all of this course information there. It's free about just doing good stuff with your produce at home.
Yeah, jump on, have a fiddle.
Have a look. It's all free.
Yeah, we're going to keep putting more content on there. As I said before, we're making a YouTube channel with a bunch of fun tips. The what's it called? The challenges out there for me to make like a little quote unquote cooking show with but trying to implement our practices.
Wow.
It might be like the sustainable chef or something, and it's like how to make a meal with like no wastage and so there's some fun stuff that we're looking to do to kind of engage, just engage like people in general, because it's like, it's good to do that kind of stuff other than our sort of our core product, which is, the sensing device inside the fresh cool storage facilities.
Yeah. Well,
awesome.
I hope that, everything pans out, especially for this cold storage monitoring system, because it sounds like such a step in the right direction.
Revolution.
And,
really.
revolution. And as long as we save waste, that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. I hope you come back soon to talk to us again.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks. See, we go off on tangents too.
We go off on tangents. And I would be like on the 5th tangent,